Today, the Tennessee House of Representatives started the voting process to expel 3 Democratic lawmakers a week after they were accused of breaking House rules by protesting inside the chamber to call for gun reform in the wake of last month's school shooting in Nashville. The 3 lawmakers, State Representative Justin Jones, Justin J. Pearson, and Gloria Johnson, are facing expulsion from the House, a dramatic act of political retribution. And in fact, they've already voted to oust Mr. Jones. The vote for Gloria Johnson failed, and we are waiting to see what happens to Justin Pearson. The Supreme Court ruled today that a transgender girl may compete on the girls' cross country and track teams at her middle school in West Virginia while her appeal moves forward, signaling that a majority of the justices are not ready to enter another battleground in the culture wars. Louisiana State University star Angel Reese says that neither she nor her team would be visiting the White House after the Tigers defeated the University of Iowa Hawkeyes 102-85 to win their first NCAA Women's Basketball National Championship. But yesterday, the school's athletic department said they would certainly accept an invitation. Justice Clarence Thomas and his wife, conservative activist Jenny Thomas, have gone on several luxury trips involving travel subsidized by and stays at properties owned by a GOP mega donor. And this is according to a new bombshell ProPublica report published just today. The hospitality was not disclosed on Thomas's public financial filings with the Supreme Court. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., that is, a controversial member of the storied Kennedy family who is known for his anti-vaccine views, has filed to run for president. According to a statement of candidacy submitted to the Federal Election Commission, he will announce his candidacy on April 19th at Boston Park Plaza. Appearing in Florida as part of his Red State tour, California Governor Gavin Newsom met with students and faculty members from the New College of Florida, the liberal arts institution embroiled in Governor Ron DeSantis' higher education overhaul and the country's culture wars. King Charles III, for the first time, has signaled support for research into the British monarchy's ties to slavery after a document showed an ancestor with shares in a slave trading company, a Buckingham Palace spokesperson said today. You are watching and listening to Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. This is hour 2 of Areva Martin in real time. So in this hour, I'm taking your calls and your comments if you're watching on KBLA TV. In this hour, I am joined by the showrunner and producer for Discovery ID's popular miniseries on the Alex Murdaugh family. The miniseries is called Deadly Dynasty. Now, according to the producers of this miniseries, this saga exposes murders, a suspicious death, and a complex web of corruption. They say they even have never before seen video footage which reveals a deadly boat ride that spurs the toppling of this powerful South Carolina dynasty. When we come forward, you meet the showrunner and producer of Deadly Dynasty. Stay with us right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
Los Angeles, get ready for a very exciting Black Music History Festival coming Saturday, April 8th in downtown Los Angeles, Pershing Square, 532 South Olive Street, featuring hip-hop legend Kool Moe Dee, R&B performances by Jane Eugene featuring Loose Ends and Cheryl Cooley of Climax. You will enjoy food vendors, African dance, spoken word, and more. This is a free event, but you must register online through Eventbrite. Brought to you by the City of Los Angeles Recreation and Parks, a Black History Music Festival celebration not to be missed.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, Maisha Cairo here, KBLA, live at Chase Bank on Crenshaw and Vernon for the In This Together tour with female business owners, a day of empowerment, community panels, and best of all, Tips on building business from marketing to capital. Today, I spoke with Tatiana, a community manager for JP Morgan Chase.
Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Tatiana Roberts. I am a community manager for JP Morgan Chase. I have to honestly say that this has been the most fulfilling position that I've ever had, where I get to give back to the community because I saw my mom's struggles. That's really what fuels what I do to make sure that the community has all the access to the resources that my mother didn't have.
So for the mother who's in business, what are 3 quick tips you can give to ensure that they're on the right path to accessing financial support from a bank like Chase?
Say number 1, just make sure that you're checking your credit on a consistent basis and taking action to either fix your credit, maintain your credit, or rebuild your credit. The second thing would be budget. I know that B word is kind of like ugly right? A lot of people don't like that B word, but it has to be done. We need to tell our money where to go. The last thing is to build a network of supporters that are going to lift you up.
The community building here in Crenshaw is that network. So visit the Chase Community Center on Crenshaw and Vernon. Meet a banker today. Tell them about your business. I'm Aisha Cairo in the community for KBLA with JP Morgan Chase.
King C. Gillette is the modern man's answer to the facial hair. With a complete set of precision tools, the King C. Gillette line offers the perfect fit for your facial hairstyle. Want to try something great? Try the Style Master, the quintessential styling tool that every man needs to craft their style. It's a waterproof, cordless trimmer with a long-lasting 4-directional blade. It's extremely versatile and designed to edge, trim, and stubble in 4 directions on any hair length. Master your style with King C. Gillette.
At Lowe's, we're always bringing pros more ways to save on the brands you trust. Right now, buy a select DeWalt 12-volt bare tool starting at $119 and get a DeWalt 12-volt 2-pack battery free valued at $129. Plus, you'll always save big on job lot quantities when buying select building supplies in bulk. Because Lowe's knows savings, Lowe's knows pros. Selection varies by location while supplies last. Lowe's reserves the right to limit quantities. Discount taken at time of purchase. Battery and charger not included with buy items.
There's no time like the present. Let's get back to more of Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
The double murder trial of Richard Alex Murdaugh concluded in Walterboro, South Carolina, with Murdaugh found guilty and sentenced to life in prison for the shooting deaths of his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul. The Murdaughs were one of South Carolina's most prominent families, but the death of teenager Mallory Beach in a drunken boating accident began the unraveling of their legacy. When Paul Murdaugh, the alleged driver of the boat, and Alex's son and his mother Maggie were found brutally murdered 2 years after the crash, a century of corruption, power, and cover-up is starting to be brought to light. Joining me in this hour is Van King. He's a supervising producer and head writer for the miniseries Murdaugh Murders, Deadly Dynasty, and also is Joe Danisi. He's the showrunner of that miniseries. Thank you, Van, and thank you, Joe, for joining me. I do want to make a correction. I said at the opening that there was some unseen footage of the boat crash in the miniseries. Apparently there isn't, but there's lots of new details about that boat crash and this family that's revealed in this miniseries. I want to start with you, Van. You were the head writer. How did you get involved in this story and in this project?
I got involved because Joe Danisi is the executive producer. And Joe and I have worked together for many years on true crime projects. And he called me about this, explaining what was going on and that to enlist my help. And off we went. And it was quite an adventure researching all that has gone on in this family's 100-year history and in particular, Alex Murdaugh's comings and goings, so shall we say.
And so, Joe, I'll ask you then. You obviously called Van, but what got you interested in this? And just to be clear, you did the miniseries even before the trial. Is that correct?
Yes, we did. We delivered the series months before he was indicted, actually. So it was very much a whodunit for all of these events, essentially, that were uncovered. I was involved because I was asked to produce it. I wasn't very familiar with what had happened in South Carolina until effectively I got the job. And that sent me digging into what was going down there in this part of the country that is called the Low Country. It's very much kind of the bayou. It's the coastal region. People get around as much by boat as they do by car. So the fact that it was a boat crash, that was the inciting incident, really, for the unraveling of this family and the revelations of Alex Murdaugh's crimes, many of which are still unadjudicated. So we can say his alleged crimes, financial crimes. The boat crash really was, the key that opened the Pandora's box.
Why do you think, Van, the nation became so captivated by the story? I mean, there are lots of folks who commit murder, and unfortunately, there are lots of people that kill their spouses and even their children. But why this story? Why do you think it just, I mean, for weeks on end, folks were tuning into the trial of Alex Murdaugh. There's been multiple docuseries on streaming sites. I was trying to count how many podcasts have been made about this family. The content seems to be endless when it comes to this family.
Well, let me say that the Murdaugh name in this southeastern corner of South Carolina is incredibly well known. They are the power base for that 5-county area. And so I think it rose to prominence locally first because just the name association alone, that this family would be associated with something so salacious and so terrible. This double murder happened, and for the longest time, none of us knew really what was going on. But I think it grew in popularity nationwide because we don't typically expect that prominent families with 100-year-long legacies of power and prestige in a community, who are seen as the community leaders, that they're capable of crimes like this. It's something that I think everyone was fascinated by. And the more tentacles of it that became known to us, and the more detail of all these various crimes, financial and criminal activities that are alleged, it just became more, it drew people more and more into it. That how could someone so on top of his game, a leader of a law firm, a partner in a law firm, whose family had run those 5 counties for the last century, how could this person be involved in a double murder and near, upwards of 70, 80 financial crimes?
So, Joe, for those folks that may not know, and we're saying it as if everyone does know, that this family ran those counties for 100 years, what did the family do? What made them so prominent?
Well, it was a unique situation. The founder of the dynasty in 1921 became the first solicitor for the 5 counties that comprised this little pocket of South Carolina. And the solicitor is effectively the district attorney. So he was the top law enforcement officer in this area. And then for 3 more successive generations, his son, his grandson, his great-grandson were the solicitors. It was basically handed down, even though it was an elected position. So the family basically controlled criminal litigation. They set somebody in the family always set the docket, which cases were coming to trial, etc. They were constantly dealing with law enforcement. So all of these relationships formed on the criminal side. They also had the largest private practice law firm in the region. And due to some unique laws in South Carolina at the time, became the greatest personal injury law firm in the area. So they also effectively controlled civil litigation in the area. So you had one family who, on the private side, was dominating civil litigation, and on the public side, controlled criminal litigation. It was a unique position for them.
And so we know about like the grandfather, the great grandfather. Were there other folks in Alex's generation who were also lawyers?
Alex's brother is a lawyer as well. He has two brothers. One of them's a lawyer, one of them is not. And he and his brother were partners in the law firm that also included non-family members as their partners. That law firm is now dissolved.
Oh, wow. Okay. And did the dissolution occur after Alex was convicted of the double murders?
No, it was before the conviction, but as his alleged financial crimes, and certainly his indictments, I think he is like well above 90 charges at this point. And by the time we delivered our series, he was facing something like 750 years in prison. So the law firm kind of, basically shut its doors during that period.
So, Van, your three-part series, it premiered on Investigation Discovery June of 2022. As we said, that was before the indictment and before the trial. So the first part, let's talk about the first part of the series. What does the first part of this three-part series focus on?
First part of the series focuses on the boat accident, which, Joe, fact check me here, occurred in 2017, was it?
Yeah, that's a good question because, kind of out of sight, out of mind with what we do.
I know
but yes, it was 2019.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. 2019. So the murders happened 2 years later. But if we go back to the boat accident, that's the event in the Murdaugh timeline that sort of began the unraveling of everything. This boat accident occurred on, it was a chilly night in the fall. Locals were out enjoying an oyster roast, they called it. And these teenagers at the time, they were all college, like freshman, sophomore age kids. Paul and his contemporaries, many of whom he'd known his whole life. It was three couples that were out on one of Paul's boats. And they were out as Joe mentioned earlier, people in that area travel by boat extensively, and there's all these tributaries through the swamps and through the marshland, and they were traveling through these very narrow tributaries and marshlands at high rates of speed, and Paul was very, very drunk. He was commanding the boat that night, and they were party hopping, and they went into town after being at a party quite late, and people had advised them to not get back on the boat, but they did, and they went into town and drank more cocktails. At least Paul and a friend of his did, one of the other guys on the boat, and while the other boatmates waited on the shore for them to return from this local bar, they got back in the boat and took off, and shortly thereafter there was some sort of altercation, which is not clear, but it appears to have been a fight between Paul and his girlfriend that occurred on the boat. The boat stopped, sort of floated in this tributary, and all of a sudden took off at a very, very high rate of speed. And mind you, it is about 1, 2 in the morning, or it's shortly after midnight, shortly after midnight, and there's lots of fog in the air that night. In other words, it was pitch black. Nightfall. He was driving at a high rate of speed, very drunk, and hit a bridge piling, which tossed three of them from the boat, Paul included. Mallory Beach was one of the victims thrown from the boat, as well as her boyfriend, and I'm forgetting his name at the moment. Joe, you remember her? Anyway, the three of them were tossed into the water, and it's believed that Mallory struck her head and was rendered unconscious, and a search began for Mallory. By the way, the other people on the boat that remained on the boat were severely injured, and lacerations, broken bones, that sort of thing. It was bad. And so police were called, fire and rescue came. This extensive search began that night, and of course, it's there's no lights. They're using a searchlight from a boat, and that's the only source of light out there, and it's heavy fog. So they had to call off the search, and they resumed it. And 5 days later, came to the very sad conclusion that they found Mallory Beach's body about several miles away from the site of the accident, where she had been taken. The currents had taken her body. So, of course, the community was devastated, and this event sort of set off lots of questions. Why were these people out this late? Why were they going at such a high rate of speed? The night of the accident, Paul and the other boat passengers were taken to the local hospital for treatment. And immediately Paul's father, Alec, and his grandfather, there's Paul in the hospital, showed up. They showed up at the hospital and allegedly were interfering with the hospital staff and were telling the boat passengers to not speak or not tell anyone the details of what had happened that night. So they were allegedly, interfering with the early stages of the investigation. I should point out too that
quickly, how old was Paul and the girl at the time?
Everyone was 19, if I remember 19, right. I think
thereabouts. Everyone was underage.
Underage. Okay, should not have been drinking.
Age, correct.
Okay. So, Joe, does Paul ever get arrested or charged with any kind of, driving under the influence, manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, any reckless drivers, any kind of criminal charges ever filed against Paul for driving while underage, being drunk, and having an accident that kills this poor Mallory?
Ultimately, charges are filed against him, and that was a great question in the community because of who his family was. Would he have to take responsibility? But he was charged with boating under the influence and causing death, and boating under the influence and causing bodily harm. And the hearings to look at his case were postponed for a long time. And ultimately, he was murdered really a very, very short time before he was supposed to effectively have his first hearing in court regarding his trial.
So he was charged, but obviously was let out on bail of some sorts because he was roaming free. He wasn't waiting in county jail for any kind of hearing to take place.
No, he wasn't. And as a matter of fact, there's video footage of him downtown drinking.
Okay, so now we have the criminal charges ultimately filed but delayed. Then there was a civil lawsuit, right, filed by Mallory's family against Paul and his parents for wrongful death, I would imagine.
There are several lawsuits that were filed, and at this point, I can't say definitively, what is still live and what is not. But yes, Mallory Beach's family filed lawsuits, and I believe those are still pending, but I can't say for sure.
And at the time of the murder, at least there was some allegations that Alec was going to have to disclose some financial documents in one of these civil lawsuits. Was that one of the claims, Van?
No. What occurred was during the course of the investigation and the sort of rumor mill that was going on around town, is that people began looking at. During the course of this 2-year passage of time between the boat accident and when Paul was charged and was about to go to trial, there were several other questions that were popping up about the Murdaugh family. One was in relationship to the death of a housekeeper that had been with the family for 25 years. Her name is Gloria Satterfield. And Gloria had died at their property, the same property where Maggie and Paul were killed, the hunting lodge in Moselle. And she had died there
years before.
Yeah, she had died there years before, and it had been declared an accident. And it was a trip and fall accident, they said. And so what happened during the course of all this is one very astute reporter was digging through court records, and she uncovered a document spelling out that a settlement had been reached between the Satterfield family and the insurance company. And Alex Murdaugh, the one who was just convicted, he had been representing the sons of Gloria Satterfield in the death of their own mother in an insurance claim against himself, which he directed them to enter into at her funeral.
So he's essentially suing his own homeowner's insurance for the slip and fall.
Correct. And what this reporter uncovered is that there had been some settlement filed in, official documentation in the county records. And so this reporter reported it, that a settlement had been reached in the Gloria Satterfield case, and that appeared to be done. And this all came as a big shock to the Satterfield family. They had no idea that a settlement had been reached. And
$4 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
$4 million had been paid out by this insurance company for the death of this housekeeper that worked for the Murdaugh family. But the sons, who were the rightful beneficiaries of the settlement, never received a dime of the money. So this becomes a part of these financial crimes or allegations of crimes that Alex Murdaugh is also facing, or was facing at the time of the death and murders of his wife and son, Paul. When we come forward, I want to talk about more about Paul, because the picture that Alex painted during the trial was of this innocent young kid, but we know that there's some history with Paul that was not told during the trial of Alex Murdaugh. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580. I'm back with Van King, supervisor producer and head writer for Murdaugh Murders, Deadly Dynasty. This is a 3-part miniseries on Discovery ID. And also Joe Danisi, the showrunner and executive producer, is here as well. But before I get back into this really bizarre and interesting story about the Murdaugh Dynasty, some breaking news out of Tennessee. The Tennessee House has voted today to expel 2 Democrats, Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, from the state legislature 1 week after they interrupted debate by leading protesters in a call for stricter gun laws in the wake of a shooting that left 6 dead at a Christian school in Nashville. Efforts to oust a 3rd state representative, Gloria Johnson, failed earlier this evening. We're going to continue to track that story as new developments occur. But before we went to break, Van and Joe, we were talking about Paul, the son of Alex Murdaugh, who was murdered along with his mother, Maggie. And during the trial of Alex Murdaugh, we got to know Paul through Alex's testimony when he took the witness stand. He referred to his son and with the loving nickname of Paw Paw and described him as this beautiful kid. And I mean, our hearts went out to him as a young man who was murdered. But you all said in your investigation and writing and producing of this miniseries, there is another side to Paul Murdaugh, which we should know about. Joe, tell us who Paul Murdaugh is, because he's not the Paw Paw that Alex wanted us to get to know and love.
Well, first, just, as a disclaimer, all of the information that we have comes, basically secondhand. Neither of us grew up in Hampton, knew any of the people, but we did speak with many people in the community. And the stories about Paul Murdaugh were disturbing. One of the women that we interviewed, who is of Hampton, she had said that when Paul was a boy, he liked to hurt animals. He liked to kill animals. He would come into the kitchen of his house and say, "Give me a knife. I'm going to go get a squirrel. I'm going to go get a bird." So, from an early age, there were disturbing stories about him. One of the stories that we heard was from this same woman who she had known Gloria Satterfield, who was the housekeeper of the Murdaughs, who had died in 2018 at Moselle, their hunting lodge. And she had said that what she heard about Gloria's death, Gloria, who practically raised Paul and Buster, his brother Buster, what this woman heard was that Gloria found Paul's drugs and was going to tell his mother. And Paul pushed her down the stairs, and that's how she basically, had her injuries. Now, again, this is a story that was told to us. We have no verification other than, it was one of the tales of Paul Murdaugh. But he had an arrest record. The video footage, the security camera footage from the night of the boat crash, and the reports from the people on the boat about his behavior it was very disturbing. You can see him doing shots. He had an alter ego. The alter ego's name was Timmy. And Timmy would emerge after Paul had, X amount of drinks or drugs in his system. And one of the hallmarks of Timmy was that his hands would sort of flex and extend. And when people who knew Paul saw that happening, they knew that, oh, Timmy's arrived. And Timmy, was not a choir boy. So, Paul had issues. I mean, clearly there were problems with Paul. Was he an addict? Was he, did substances play a part? Was he a sociopath? Ultimately, Paul is a victim of his father, but there was a lot of damage there beforehand.
Yeah,
Areva,
go ahead, Van. Go ahead.
If I could just elaborate very briefly on the Gloria Satterfield incident. This happened at the Moselle family home where the mother and son were later murdered. But he ostensibly or allegedly pushed her down these brick stairs, like 5 or 6 stairs, and she suffered severe head injuries. Then his mother is on the 911 call, and this is confirmed in the 911 audio, that Paul This is a severely, severely injured woman who cannot form speech. She's in and out of consciousness at that time, and she's bleeding severely from her head. And on the call, Maggie confirms that Paul has stood her back up and dropped her down again. So
What?
she fell a second time down these stairs and on her head, creating additional injury. So this was all confirmed in the 911 audio.
Wait a minute, man. Why do we know why? Let's start with this. Were Paul and Maggie there when the housekeeper allegedly fell?
Paul was just outside the home on the steps with Gloria. Maggie was just inside the home on the phone with 911. And she's very agitated with the 911 operator and giving her a hard time. And the 911 operator is asking her what's going on. And Maggie's basically narrating, oh, he's gotten her up again. Oh, and she fell again. So
why is he getting a woman up who's bleeding from her head?
That's a very good question.
What is he doing? What is he trying to do with it?
Yeah, he's not medically trained or in any way, shape, or form.
Well, if you watch any television show, you don't try to move a person that's falling. You don't even have to be
correct.
Wow, that's so bizarre. Okay, correct. So there was, I guess, was there a police investigation of this housekeeper's death, and was it determined no foul play?
It was determined at the time, and it was written on her death certificate as a trip and fall accident, that this was an act. No, no one trips and falls twice and causes head injuries of this degree. So they said that the Murdaughs claimed that the dogs from the kennels had been released, and that Gloria was not a fan of dogs, and the dogs were approaching her, and they tripped her up as she was walking up the stairs and knocked her down. But the problem with that story is that there is in the 911 call, there is no sound of any dog anywhere near. There's no barking dog. There's nothing that corroborates the Murdaugh version of that. So Alec, though, to the end, even told Gloria's sons that that's what happened, and that was the cause of her accident, and that he wanted to make it right, so that he directed the sons to sue him, and that he would get them a settlement from his insurance company, which, as we stated earlier, never got to the boys. It got to Alex's bank account.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Alex and all of the financial issues he's has, the trouble he has, and the allegations against him. But before we do that, Joe, I do want to talk about this other murder. So we got the housekeeper, and then there's another young boy who somehow is associated with this family. Tell us about this other young kid.
Well, the other death is in regard to Stephen Smith. And Stephen Smith was a 19-year-old guy. He was a nursing student in Hampton, and he was found dead at 4 a.m, lying in the center of a road by a person who was driving by. And it was ruled at the time as a hit and run. Effectively, it was determined, quote unquote, that Stephen was in the road and a truck or a large vehicle came by, and the mirror perhaps hit his head, and that's what killed him. But that was the official story. I interviewed a member of the South Carolina Highway Patrol who did not buy that when he was initially part of the investigation, and he undertook his own investigation. And what he had said to me was, when there is a hit and run, there's going to be evidence, there's going to be skid marks, there's going to be debris in the road, there's going to be debris in the victim's body, pieces of plastic, paint, etc. When there's a hit and run of that impact, the victim's shoes are going to get thrown off, his cell phone is going to get thrown out of his pocket. And Stephen was found basically very, intact, except for the blunt force trauma to his head, lying in the center of the road, shoes on, phone present. There was no broken glass. There was nothing. And this one law enforcement officer, his specialty is accidents. What he did for South Carolina Highway Patrol was unpack vehicle accidents. You know, how did this happen in a forensic manner? And he investigated this left, right, and center. And he said this kid was killed. He was murdered.
And now we know that the law enforcement agencies in South Carolina have reopened an investigation because some evidence came to light with the murder of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh, which suggests, as you said, that this wasn't a hit and run accident and he possibly was murdered. And we know that not only Paul, but the other brother, Buster Murdaugh, is somehow being implicated in this death of Stephen Smith. When we come forward, I want to talk about these 90 potential financial crimes that Alex Murdaugh is being charged for. And also, he's getting love letters. People want to marry him, even though he's serving the double life prison sentence. And Netflix wants to do follow-on, additional streaming series with him while he's in jail serving double life for the murder of his wife and son, Paul. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
LA Mayor Karen Bass and the city attorney announced Skid Row housing preservation and rehab initiative. Maisha Kyra here with your K-Black Minute News. LA Mayor Karen Bass and City Attorney Heidi Feldstein Soto recently announced an initiative to preserve and rehabilitate 2,000 housing units in Skid Row. The announcement comes after the Skid Row Housing Trust's recent communication that it would no longer be able to operate the 29 buildings it runs across the city. So this new plan will turn the city's aging downtown real estate into housing for the homeless. In reference to this plan, the mayor says that failure is not an option. Losing nearly 2,000 units of housing would be devastating to Skid Row, and it would be felt citywide, and people would lose their lives. What do you think about this new plan? Let us know on all socials at KBLA 1580.
The Anti-Racism, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiative, LA County Supervisor Holly Mitchell, 2nd District, and the City of Compton are excited to announce the release of the inaugural State of Black Los Angeles County Report. Join us this Saturday, April 8th from 12:30 to 3 p.m. at Dollar Hyde Community Center in Compton. Los Angeles County is home to the 3rd largest Black population in the U.S. Black Angelinos have been integral to the cultural, economic, and socio-political landscape of LA County. Yet, we continue to experience adverse life outcomes resulting from anti-Black racism. This community launch event will include food, giveaways, and swag. See you there. To RSVP, please go to bit.ly/SBLA launch or text 626-399-1474.
Join Black Wealth Matters, an educational series as we explore and explain the Black college athletes playbook in a 5-part series starting April 6th. Dr. Davarian Baldwin, an award-winning scholar and author, seen in Time, CNBC, and more, helps us follow the college dollars. Coach John Mosley, fan favorite of Netflix's docuseries Last Chance U, covers the new world of the college athletes. David McGriff, one of the leaders in the NIL and sports world and owner of the McGriff Agency, explains NIL and the effects on Black athletes. Keisha Richardson gives the challenges of raising a Black athlete. And last, for the bonus series, we want to give athletes the tools to capitalize from their name and likeness with swimming bronze medalist from the 2021 Paralympics, Jamal Hill. There is no cost for the series. It's a live webinar. Questions are welcome. Register on KBLA1580.com.
There's no time like the present. Let's get back to more.
All right, Van King, supervising producer of Murdaugh Murders, Deadly Dynasty, and Joe Danisi, our showrunner and executive producer of that series, are joining me in our final minutes. Let's talk about these financial crimes. So even if Alex Murdaugh had been found not guilty of killing his wife and his son, Paul, Joe, he was facing, I think you said, up to 750 years in prison for stealing, $8-9 million from a combination of folks, including his own clients. Talk to us about some of these financial crimes that he's been accused of.
Well, there are 99 felony counts currently against Alex Murdaugh and for financial crimes. And what he's alleged to have done is set up a very interesting scheme. There is a consulting group called Forge in the South, and they handle large payouts for insurance payouts for individuals. They're known to judges, they're known to financial institutions, etc. What Alec did was open an account called Forge and with Bank of America. And so effectively, what enabled him to defraud his clients was that he would have the payouts delivered into the Forge account. The institutions, the insurance companies, the judges that were signing off on these payouts saw Forge and it's like, oh, well, that's the disbursement company. But in fact, it was Alex's pocket. So he was able to defraud his clients in this way, effectively, filing these claims, getting these enormous payouts and not dispersing the money to the clients, but keeping it for himself.
So
this
then,
is what he would.
But why is this guy the descendant of these, legacy lawyers? They run the biggest law firm. They run all of the, the DA's offices. They have Moselle, which look, I don't know, like a 20, 30 acre property. These folks were rich. Why is he stealing this money?
Well, that's a good question. He would blame it on his drug addiction, that he was in need of paying for this increasingly out-of-hand drug addiction to painkillers.
But wait a minute, you're one guy. Are you buying $8 to $9 million worth of drugs?
I mean, that's exactly you're tracking with the same logic we had trouble with. And so I don't know how someone takes that many pills, but he claimed that his drug habit was just out of whack. And there's no trail in terms of money being deposited in some foreign bank account or anything like that. There's really, the money just ends with this Forge account, but his account is apparently empty, according to his attorneys. They were crying poor at his initial arraignment, saying that he didn't have a means to pay for his own bond out of jail. But the thing he would do with his clients is that he would lie to them for years. For years, he would tell them, we're still waiting for payout from the insurance company, when the payment had been made months and months, if not years prior to that, and he'd already spent their money. He was still, there was a state trooper who had been severely injured in an accident, rear-ended accident during a snowstorm, in one of a rare snowstorm in South Carolina. And he'd suffered such bad nerve damage in his neck and body that it was going to take him out of commission, and he lived out his medical leave from law enforcement, and he was meant to live on this settlement the rest of his life. And Alex stole all that from him and his family. So this man was left destitute.
Joe, we've seen these cases. We've seen them. Michael Avenatti comes to mind, the lawyer for Stormy Daniels. He's serving time in jail now. He was stealing his clients' money, but he was buying private jets and Ferraris and, very expensive toys. Was that what Alex was doing? Was there evidence that he was spending, money, leading some kind of lavish lifestyle?
Not that I saw, and not that any of the people that we spoke with stated, but an ethics lawyer whom we interviewed, who was consulting on one of the cases brought against Alex Murdaugh, he used an old phrase, but it's very true. He said, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And Alex Murdaugh had, in this area of the country, kind of absolute power. He wasn't a solicitor at the time he was charged, at the time he killed his wife and son. But he was a volunteer solicitor, so he could effectively function as the district attorney, as well as the person who was the solicitor. So, this is a guy who basically never had to answer to anyone. And for whatever reason, whatever compelled him to allegedly defraud all of these people, vulnerable people, injured people, people who really needed his assistance and whom he just screwed over, whatever compelled him to do that, perhaps that's what compelled him to blow the head off his son and shoot his wife.
Yeah, real quickly, Van, let's talk about the murders. Again, the explanation that has been given was that he was trying to distract from the financial crimes, from the lawsuits involving Paul and the girl Mallory, who he murdered in that boat accident. None of that made sense to me. Like, okay, you might distract people for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, but no one's going to forget that you've stolen $8-9 million, and no one's going to forget that your son was responsible for the death of a teenage girl while you're driving under the influence, driving a boat. So did you ever uncover any other motive for him killing his wife and son other than what we've been told in the press?
Well, if we step into that moment in time in Alex Murdaugh's life, things were coming to a head for him. His son was 2 days away from being brought up on charges and a trial to begin for this wrongful death of Mallory Beach. His wife was allegedly in the latter stages of filing divorce, and that he was, of course, unhappy about that. And he's denied that. His attorneys have denied any sort of divorce or any sort of problem with the marriage. But there's many other indications that the divorce was well underway. And Alec himself had just been, the murders happened in the summer months, and he had just been called out by his brother for having stolen from the law firm. So he knew that all these charges were coming down on him. And so whether the divorce was motivation, whether it was a distraction to elicit a sympathy or an empathy for himself and a distraction from the financial crimes, we'll probably never know the answer to that question, but that's what many of the people we're talking to locally believe was his motivation. Wow. Was to create a distraction so that people wouldn't focus on the financial crimes, but instead would, have empathy and sympathy for this man who's lost his wife and son.
Well, the miniseries is called Murdaugh Murders, Deadly Dynasty. It's on Discovery ID. It's produced by Van King and executive produced by Joe Danisi, and it's a fascinating look at the life of this very wealthy, powerful family in South Carolina. Thank you for the work that both of you have done in helping us understand this family, and make sure I want all my viewers and listeners to tune in, watch it, support Joe and Van in the work that they're doing. Thanks so much, guys, for joining me. Next voice that you will hear will be Robin Ayers from the Raw Report. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.